YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. So today, guys, we finally are done with the week's work. We're doing the tier list for the week, and last week we got newer supports from Fableds, Jurax, and Six Samurais. Not to mention the newer archetype that is Ryzeal. Anyway, so we're gonna do the tier list for this day here, and this is gonna be for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, rogue decks, playable decks, and basically unplayable decks. So typically, this is all of the decks that I managed to compile so far within my games in rank. If I miss something else, tell me in the comment section below. So first and foremost, we're gonna go with Argostar here. As you might know, Argostar has a good playable capability with the game, but it's not really that competitive. If you're really a fan of trap decks that has a bit of control strategy. Also, the effects with the negate and the pop with their own continuous trap card as monsters is kind of unique in a way. But regardless, I'm going to put this one as playable though. Then we have the new Mermail and Atlanteans, which is very commonly used in the tier 3 section as what I will put this on. The strategy for this relies mostly with your water monsters discarding another water monster as a cost, and the cost can gain you advantage any water monster from that point on. The only downside for this is the inconsistency in gaining access to your reliable cards in most times. There are some garnets with this deck as well that you are bound to end up during your draw phase, which is a bit of a frustrating thing if you're playing this deck. Consistently, you will able to gain access to those reliable cards that you need, whether you're going first or you're going second. It is still very powerful for a strategy to work with in the format that we're in. Blue Eyes I'm going to put always on tier 2. Regardless, with the semi-limits to Sage and Maiden, it's not really that bad because what you lack with the two cards, you can just add on with 2 copies of Peri's Map, or basically you can add with a copy of Bingo Machine Go, or another good consistency maker for the deck is 1-for-1, which is not really too bad of a add-on for the deck. Then we have Branded. I would say Branded is still top-notch as the top contending deck so far. The craziest thing about this deck is it capitalized on the banished cards, the graveyard effects, or even every one draw that this deck can actually acquire. Amazingly, the 2 Branded Fusion was kind of nuts for the update. The 3 Branded openings, the 3 Alibers, and even the 3 Sirenaires was kinda insane for this deck. So I'm gonna put this one on tier 1. Very strong for a strategy if you are into the whole dark type thing or theme, whatever. Centurions. I would say Centurions are tier 3. Maybe even better than Mermail. The reason for this, it is very consistent enough in gaining you the correct cards. Another best thing about Centurions is they have a lot of room for non-engines, like hand traps, going up against meta decks. Chimeras is very straightforward. The win condition is always going to be like ripping one card from your opponent's hand and maybe play off in the next game with a control strategy, or even Diabels, which doesn't allow your opponent from ever activating spell cards or trap cards during that turn unless you set that. So another clear strategy indeed. But regardless of that, I'm gonna put that one as rogue. I think the only downside for this deck is relying only on one monster in the field. That can easily be removed by this format that we're in. Isn't that too reliable in gaining you some of your wins? Then we have Christrons. Christrons are typically one of the best decks so far. Very consistent. Every card you send to the graveyard always has a floating effect that can gain you more access to another card. You can easily go into your synchro plays for a 7, or you can go for rank 5 on the field. Anyways, Christians are still pretty good as tier 2. Then we have DDDs. I would say DDDs are kind of good though. Even though that their new supports grants you additional consistency, the same downside is still going to be with the Link monster. If ever that Link monster is negated, there's no way to gain access to your Pendulum monsters. In most cases, that's one big problem for the deck. Maybe there's some other good DDD players out there, but for me, it's basically playable on my side. Dinos. The new well, typically Dinos doesn't really have a clear support. It's just basically Jurak in a sense, which is a pretty good playable deck. I played this in countless times, but one downside for the Jurak deck or the newer supports is if ever you just negate Stego by Imperm, Veiler, or even Ash, it's basically game over unless you have a follow-up after that negate. Typically, the deck works pretty well if you have 3 copies in the graveyard of the new level 10 Synchro Monster. Much better if you have them in the graveyard just for your win condition. Dinos, like I said, still pretty good, but I'm gonna put that one on Rogue. Better play Dinos as a pure version without even the Jorax. But you know, it's up to you if you want to do that type of playstyle. But there's no point of using Dinos with a bit of Jorax because you just destroy everything on the field though. Just play it as it is, which is way better. And then we have the Millennium deck. So the only limit for this deck is just the Golem, which isn't that too problematic. I think they just cut the Golem to 1 because of the consistency it gives out to other decks like Tier Elements and whatnot. Even Snake Eyes before, which is very formidable. So I'm gonna put this one as still a pretty good pretty good deck to play with. Fiendspell Control always gonna be like tier 3. I think that's a clear way of representing the deck. Its skill based is almost identical to Centurion's, but not to an extent. It's just, you know, an average level, I would say. Then we have Fire Kings. Fire Kings are still a pretty good strategy to work with. Very strong deck, even up against Ryzeal, which is very common on popping cards on the field, which Fire Kings capitalize on. So I'm going to put this one on tier 3. Very strong strategy still, even if you play it in the format that we're in today. But I think it's much better if you play it with Snake Eyes. Heroes. There are a lot of ways to build a hero deck. There are a lot of supports for heroes, and it really depends on your knowledge with the hero deck on how to build it in the format that we're in. So I'm just gonna put this one as Rogue. Fable decks, I'm gonna put this one as playable. Just there are no proper variants for it. I think that's the best way to put it. Kashtiras are gonna be tier 2. The best version for Kashtiras is gonna be Stun. Very strong deck in the format that we're in, especially if you're going up against Malice. Every monster effect, you can just remove one of the 3 Malice monsters from your extra deck, or even the Terahertz if ever you are able to. I think I'm gonna put also, did I put Stun here? Yes, I did put Stun. So I'm gonna put Stun and Kashtira Stun here. Still very reliable even in the format that we're in. Goblin Bikers. Goblin Bikers are pretty much Rogue. Even if you pair it with, what should I call it? Matte Reactor. I think that's the best version for Goblin Bikers. You know what? I'm gonna place Matte Reactor as playable. Labyrinth. Labyrinth is tier 2 in a sense. Way back, I'm always putting Labyrinth as tier 1. But now with Ryzeal and Malice on board or in the format, it would be pretty good as a tier 1 deck though, or Labyrinth would be pretty good as a tier 1 deck if there is side decking. So you are gonna be debating on yourself on what trap card to properly use up against Malice or up against Ryzeal, which is very confusing at times. So that's it. Then we have Live Twins. Now Live Twins, I've played with this countless of times, even with a small engine with Unchained, or even a pure version with the new supports in the form of Lightless Shadow. Still pretty much Rogue though. I couldn't expect too much from this deck unless we got the newer supports. Still pretty good as a Rogue deck, I would say. Then we have Magical Musketeers. I'm gonna put this one as playable. Malice, there's no doubt about it. It's basically tier 1, maybe better. Mimigul. Mimiguls are playable, I would say. Not too much that you can expect from Mimigul other than flipping cards, but I think that's basically it. You can't put another variant for this or another engine for this. Then we have the new Pendulum deck, always going to be on Rogue, I would say. Even the Astrograph Sorcerer on 2 copies was a bit of a consistency bump to the deck. Regardless, it's not really contending too much in the format that we're in for higher decks. Mathmex, I'm gonna put this one on tier 3. Even now that we have 3 copies of Signet Mining, 3 copies of Diameter, and I think that's basically it, right? They have all the Mathmech cards accessible for them, which is kind of nuts though. And as long as Circular, and I've been repeating this for countless of times in my previous tier list, as long as Circular is still on 3 copies, this deck is always going to be part of the tier. Punks. Punks are pretty reliable in some of your games. Very solid strategy, I would say, especially now that the rank master that they have can negate, which is what you primarily need for the deck. Also, the advantage of the newer supports or the new level 8 supports gains you a lot of consistency for the deck as well, which you primarily need for the deck. So I'm going to put this one as Rogue. I think I think this is way better to put it here. Very reliable. Memento. Mementos are tier 1. If you know how to play this deck, that's pretty good. And I think people were gonna hate me on this, but yeah, honestly, this deck is just yes. If ever you have all of the cards you needed, even for the spell cards, you can just capitalize on that, and you work your way with the creation in the grave, or the creation in hand, whatever. That, of course, if you know how to play this deck. Ryuji, the only downside for Ryuji is the negate of the field spell, or if you try to destroy the field spell, that's basically the end of the game. I mean, you can't do anything on that matter. Also, if you try to use the Lancia up against Ryuji, they can't actually use the field spell. As long as Malice is still in the format and people are using Lancia or any type of non-banish effects, then you can't totally rely on Ryuji in most cases as a strategy. Sharks, on the other hand, is pretty reliable. That, of course, the skill base for this is almost identical to Fiendsmith Control, but not as reliable as Fiendsmith Control. Some garnets for the deck that you tend to draw in most of your hand. Very reliable if you're going second and trying to break some boards. Or another downside for the deck is that they don't have a proper negate. Sky Strikers, I would say it's unplayable. If you're playing this as pure, it's unplayable. But if you pair this with Tenpai, it's basically like tier 3 or something. Sprites, practically rogue. They actually maxed out all of the beavers, all of the swap frogs. It is still not enough in the format that we're in. One minor problem with the deck is, although you have consistency in most of your games right there, and you have a lock on the summons for link 3s or rank 3s or even level 3s or higher, sprites have a hard time of going up against beatdown decks. So yeah, they're pretty much rogue at this point on, but very consistent, I would say. Runics, unplayable. Honestly, just stop playing this deck, especially in the format that we're in. You don't want to banish the top cards of your opponent's deck if ever you're going up against Malice. Sword Souls and Tenyis, I'm practically gonna put this one on tier 3. Really reliable strategy though, especially now that they have the new level 4 tuner. It can gain you access to another body from the extra deck, and then summons another token on the field, which is kind of crazy in most cases there. You have Protoss still accessible for the deck. What's the name of that Yangzing monster that doesn't allow your opponent from ever using light monster effects? Solid strategy if ever you are interested in Sword Souls back. Ryzeal, I'm gonna put Ryzeal as tier 2. It is reliable. The closest resemblance to Ryzeal as a playstyle is Exo Sisters. If you don't know how to use the deck properly, it's not gonna be in your favor in most cases. Typically, you need to know the ins and outs of this deck. And the best thing about Ryzeal is it can counter Malice. Also, it's still very consistent though, even with the X on 2 copies, it's not really like a big problem. New 6 Samurai strategy, I would put this one as playable. You just have to stop the Shogun from ever getting you the spell. That's basically it. Then we have Thunder Dragons. Although there are some instances that this is going to be reliable in some decks. Maybe up against Ryzeal though, maybe. Vanquish Souls, they're still going to be rogue in my own opinion. Very strong deck if you know how to play this deck. White Forest, I'm going to put this one as rogue still. Very good deck, especially if you're going to pair it with Centurions or Azaminas. The only downside for this is a lot or a buttload of spell summons, which you can just get nibbed, which is a bit of a problem for the deck. Yubel, tier 2, pretty good tier 2 deck, even in the format that we're in. Not many players are actually playing Yubel at the current format just because of the new Malice decks. Fiendsmith is still accessible. Then yeah, it's still a tier 2 deck. Tier Elements, pretty much a tier 3. Yeah, they're still very solid for a strategy if you're into tier elements. Then we have Unchained. Unchained with the newer supports of Lightless Shadow. I would still put this one as rogue. Still a pretty good deck to actually play. Voiceless Voice, practically tier 3. Yeah, there are a lot of good variants for Voiceless Voice, especially if you're gonna pair them with Kashtiras or whatnot. But still, I'm gonna pair them, or I'm gonna still use Voiceless Voice as a pure version, which is still reliable in the format that we're in. Anywho's, that is all of our tier list for today, guys. What are your thoughts on tier list? Like I said earlier, if I miss anything, please tell me in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Keep safe, good luck. I'm really eager enough to check out some other contents for this week, even though it's Saturday and yeah, tomorrow's Sunday. But anywho, see you guys later. Keep safe, good luck. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. Goodbye, guys.